Welcome to the podcast, Working Drummer. Today we talk to Ed Toth. For close to 20 years, Ed has held down two powerhouse gigs. From 96 to 2005, Ed was the drummer and member of the band Vertical Horizon. Since 2005, Ed has been playing drums with the legendary Doobie Brothers. To find out more about this podcast and other podcasts, go to workingdrummer.net, find us on Facebook, Twitter, and also on iTunes. Here is Ed Toth. First of all, thanks. I appreciate this.
Yeah.
Taking the time to do that. We were going to do this outside, but
it's my pleasure.
The wind is not cooperating, but you might hear it in the background because we have doors open and it feels good in here. I kind of like to start just by having you talk about what you're doing.
Sure.
And I think people know what you're doing, but at the same time, what keeps you busy these days? Maybe something that's been going on the last few months, and then we'll kind of back up from there.
Sure. Well, I am currently doing a podcast.
Okay, great.
For workingdrummer.net, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so what year were you born? Let's go back.
All right, that brings us up to date. Let's take it back to the beginning. Excuse me. Well, the current gig, which has been my gig for the last 10 years, is playing with the Doobie Brothers, which has been a lot of fun and really kind of surreal at the same time because my folks were fans when I was a kid.
Right.
And that's how I kind of knew the Doobie Brothers. I joined the Doobies in 2005, which was right about the time I left Vertical Horizon. There was a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. Yeah. So I've been doing that for 10 years, and it's been great. I mean, they do about 80 shows a year, so that keeps us pretty busy. It looks like we're doing a little bit more this year because they put out a record last year, like country duets. Doobie Brothers songs done in country style with country artists. So, which is done pretty good for them, I guess. So there seems to be a little bit more work this year, which is, always exciting when you're on a day rate, that when there's more work.
Oh, right, for sure.
So that's pretty cool.
Well, 80 shows, that's a good chunk, but it's not insane.
Yeah.
It allows you to kind of pursue other things if you have the schedule ahead of time and you're able to look ahead and months ahead. So are you able to do that?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I have a really good idea of what the rest of my year looks like at this point.
Okay.
And it's April. We're sitting here talking. So that's a good thing to have. Things will pop up here and there, but it's rare that I get information about a date that's a month or a couple of months away. I'll never get like, hey, we added a date next week, are you free? That never happens. Okay. It's always booked farther in advance than that. So
are there things that when you look at your schedule and say, okay, I'm going to be able to do this, are there things that you're pursuing, or are there things that come up as far as sessions or doing other gigs, or I know there's some projects in the past that you've been a part of that you've helped create.
Yeah, things pop up from time to time. It's kind of weird because I'm not as active as maybe I'd like to be in terms of letting people know about availability and things like that. I just kind of rely on. I mean, I've been out doing this long enough that there's a little bit of word of mouth with what
right.
I do, what I'm good at, what I'm good to call for, and then every once in a while, like I get those calls. Like I never wanted to. I mean, I didn't come to Nashville to be like studio guy. I came to Nashville because I was leaving one band and wanted to find really another sort of find a touring gig. I was kind of hell-bent on being a sideman when I left Vertical, because I had done the band member thing.
Yes.
And there were great things about that. And there were other things about that where I was just like, you know what? I just want to show up and like count to 4 and not have to say, hey, this is Ed Toth and you're listening to Lightning 100. You know, I had done enough of that and don't get me wrong, I feel very fortunate to have been able to do that, but I had done enough of that during 9 years with Vertical Horizon that I just wanted to show up somewhere, count to 4 and just, you know, unload on the drum kit and then walk off stage and go listen to music.
Now, are there any Doobie Brothers songs that are in 6? Does that mess your whole plan up?
No. Yeah, that doesn't really mess things up.
Okay, good.
So that's really good, you know. Gosh, I think everything's just straight up 4/4. So.
I think your planet's coming together.
But so that, you know, again, I didn't come here to sort of throw my hat in the ring. I came here because I knew that I wanted a gig on a certain level, and I wasn't going to find it where I was living at the time, which was Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a ceiling in Boston, you know. So I literally did the thing that a lot of people do, and I mean, this is after having been in the business, you know, full time for 10 years. I took out a piece of paper and wrote down L.A., Nashville, New York, and then just started going through my day runner and made a list of all the people I knew that were in those cities.
Yeah.
And then I sort of did a pro and con thing. I have 2 daughters, and I had one already at that point. And so I had to take into account other things like cost of living, family atmosphere, things like that. And so I kind of ruled out New York almost immediately, which was a little bit of a drag because I grew up in Connecticut. And there's such a romantic notion about living in New York. And I guess if I had started out as a full-time jazz player, that might make a little more sense.
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to do that, you know, with having a kid. Boston was kind of like a big town.
Okay.
And New York is just a metropolitan city, you know.
Yes, yeah.
Big time, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of ruled that out. I gave some serious consideration to Los Angeles, but there were a couple of factors with that. One was cost of living. The other thing, too, is one of the I love being in Los Angeles. I really do. I love the weather. I love the atmosphere. But one of the things that I love about being in Los Angeles is that I realize that at some point I will be leaving Los Angeles. And so I thought to myself, okay, that doesn't really bode well for, you know, if I'm considering being there permanently. Right. The idea of, you know, seeing people being on 100% at the grocery store because they might get discovered or whatever. I don't have time for that, you know? Right. So I ended up here, and I knew, surprisingly to me, over the course of the Vertical career, I knew more people in Nashville than anywhere else. You know,
through your experience with Vertical Horizon.
Yeah, just through meeting various people, drummers in particular, and so what I did was, I have a good friend in town that a lot of people in town know, a guy named Neoshi Jackson. Yeah. And Neoshi I had met during the Vertical stuff, and we stayed in touch here and there, and I would always see him when I came to Nashville. And I always liked coming to Nashville. It was one of my favorite cities to come to and hang out at. And Neoshi was just very gracious. He just said, I said, yeah, I'm thinking about coming down and hanging out for a couple of weeks and seeing if, you know, checking the scene out and seeing if it's somewhere I want to be and sort of inject myself into the scene, because it doesn't, regardless of your track record, stuff doesn't happen automatically, you know? No. I mean, you have to put years into being in a place before things start to pick up for you. Right. And I was aware of this.
No matter what your background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I was cool with that. I just wanted to keep playing the drums, you know? So Neoshi, gentleman that he is, said, I have a guest room that's empty. Why don't you just come live in my house? Nice. And I'll be in and out. I'll give you a key. Like, you just come stay here. So I started doing this thing, which I look back now is a little mad, but, you know, the things that we do to pursue our living is, it's just what we do. I started doing this commute where I would drive down in my car from Boston, spend a couple weeks in Nashville, and then drive back up to Boston.
This was after you left Vertical Horizon? Yeah,
I was sort of in the process of leaving Vertical Horizon at this point. We were staring down the barrel of a year where we weren't going to work. 2005. We had done a reissue of our second record, which was called Go, and everything about it, other than the recording process and the record itself, that stuff was great. The promotion and everything for it was just miserable. The record company changed hands while we were doing it, and it became this weird double-edged sword. You know, VH1, who played the hell out of like the Everything You Want video and the You're a God video, wanted to, where's the video for your single? You know, first single was a song called I'm Still Here. Oh, well, we haven't made one yet. So, we go to the record label, like, hey, VH1's bugging us about a video. Well, we want to see the song do more action at radio. It's like, yeah, but you're not really helping with that,
Okay.
Maybe if we did the video, like, they'd help each other out.
And what year was this?
This would have been, Go came out in 03. September of 03, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, because we made it in 02. We wanted it to come out in September of 02. It was done. It was done in the summer of 02.
Okay.
And this is when all the record company stuff went down. Clive Davis came in as the president of RCA. Bob Jameson was let go. Everybody underneath him was let go. Our A&R guy was let go. And to me, that's when the crack appeared on the wall.
I see.
Because our A&R guy was in our corner.
Right. You've got to have those people
completely
on your team.
Well, that's it. It was the team. All of a sudden, this team that was amazing with Everything You Want. I mean, Everything You Want came out in September of 99, the album. Had a first single called We Are, which made a little bit of dent in modern rock radio, but not much else. And then we released Everything You Want as a single after the new year. And it took like 3 months for this thing to build. It was a slow burn, which just doesn't happen anymore. You either hot out of the box or they're done with you, And people at the record label just worked it and worked it and worked it. And we were working it and working it and working it. I mean, you talk about the realities of life on the road. I mean, we would get up at about 6 every morning. We would get picked up at our hotel by the label rep, several of which I'm still really good friends with today.
Okay.
I play rock and roll trivia with one of them here in Nashville every other Monday at the Stone Fox. There's a plug for you. So, we would go and we would do like 3 and 4 radio stations around town, play a couple songs acoustic. I mean, on these morning shows, 7 in the morning.
Right.
With these yahoos who like are wide awake, like who love to talk and have weird sound effects whistles and stuff because they're trying to get people.
I don't have those today.
Damn.
Yeah, so.
They're trying to get people to and from work, and that's cool. And so what better time to be on the radio promoting your record than first thing in the morning when everybody's driving to work?
Yeah.
So we do 3 and 4 radio stations, play a couple of songs, joke around, do the liner stuff I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then inevitably somebody wanted to take you to lunch. You go to lunch, which is cool. You're on the road. A free meal is a free meal,
Sure.
unless the record rep pays for it, in which case it's going back to your account and will be a recoupable expense, which is we do a whole podcast on that stuff.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
And then by the time you get done, it's 2-3 in the afternoon. Maybe you have time to take a little bit of a nap, but you're kind of amped from doing all this stuff already. You go do a sound check, you get a little bit of dinner, you do the gig, you go to sleep. You wake up the next morning, you do the same thing
again
in another city. So it was busy, and it worked. I mean, Everything You Want was a number 1 song. It was number 1 for one. It was all over the radio that summer, and it was number 1 on the Hot 100 for one glorious week. I have a plaque with the chart on it. It's pretty great. And all the people below us are like Sting and Cher and Matchbox 20, some of our peers and stuff. And it was just kind of cool, like to see, like, I grew up working in record stores and stuff, and we read Billboard because that's how we arranged our 45 section was from the Hot 100 chart, and there we were at the top of it, and it was just like, what a moment,
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can say they played drums on a number 1 song,
But it wasn't lost on you, all the extra work.
No, it was the effort of several people.
Yeah.
To kind of make this happen. It's just not a matter of like throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks,
Right.
So where am I at in the story? So we made the second record, and the team had fallen apart. So the record just really didn't get the promotion it wanted. The powers that be at the new powers that be at the label already had a vision for what they wanted the label to be, and we didn't fit in with that. So it was like, okay, well, now we have to hit the road, which was sort of part of the plan anyway.
Right.
looking back, I don't think we hit the road as much or sort of as properly as we could have. We kind of did spot dates here and there. Okay. There wasn't any real tour per se. And that's where some weird things started to happen internally. Just issues of publishing, whether or not to split publishing revenue and things like that. And we sort of went through the cycle with the Go record, and it just didn't do what we hoped it would do. So we got dropped by the label, which you could see the writing on the wall that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Certainly to me, it wasn't that big of a surprise when that came down. And then a plan was floated by our management company. The management company was going to have a little record label, and they were going to reissue the record, basically, and try to work one of the songs at radio that we thought could have been a hit. I wasn't totally keen on this idea. So that was another thing for me that was like, it's like we've done this. This is done, Maybe we can license that song and one of the others that we thought could have been a hit back from RCA and just make a new record and go out and do that and go the indie route. I'm a total music nerd, so sort of paying attention to what some other people were doing. People were just starting to do the indie thing.
That's why I was asking you before, what date was this all happening? And you were saying around 2003, 2004.
Yeah, well, the record was done, and we wanted it to come out in September 2002, and it did not come out until September of 2003, a year later.
Okay. It just seems like the dynamic of the music industry was changing a lot.
Very much.
During those, beginning maybe mid-90s into the mid to late 2010s, with just the record labels being restructured, the way music is being distributed, the way artists are getting the materials out there, and the relevance of things like MTV and VH1, how that affected music today compared to when it first started in the 1980s, and how all that changed, or how things have changed so dynamically from decade to decade. So knowing a little bit of the history of the band, and it's like, what was going on? And it sounds like, and they're still struggling, the larger labels, they're fumbling about trying to figure out how to, reclaim the glory days of when they had so much control and now there's less control.
Well, they dropped the ball completely. Yeah. And to me, the big earthquake was the Napster thing with file sharing. And to me, that's where the labels dropped the ball. That's where they should have gotten on board and said, okay, this is the future.
Right.
Let's start working on models to monetize this and
let's not fight it. Let's figure out
stream revenue. Let's try to make this work. And instead, they fought it, and it turned around and sort of bit them in the butt. The labels will, I think, always exist because they have all that back catalog, and that's all these reissues are. And they're so happy now that this vinyl thing seems to be, which personally I don't think it's as big of a thing as they make it out to be in the press. But the vinyl thing, everything's out on vinyl now. Well, it's just another thing to get you to buy that record again, because you're not going to buy the new Katy Perry record, if you're in a certain demographic. But you'll buy Physical Graffiti for the fourth time because either your copy's worn out or, it's just an amazing record.
Yeah, guilty as charged.
Yeah, me too, because I'm a total nerd. So some of the reissues I've bought into, particularly when there's bonus content, anything that's just remastered or whatever, it's like, come on, most people don't realize with a lot of these remastering, all they're doing is turning it up. So you can play it on the newest fangled device that's out this week.
Right. It goes to 11.
Exactly.
Why don't you just
we turn this up to 11? We can get people to buy it again. So it's that kind of thing. So the labels will always exist and be there. I personally, when I talk to younger kids and they want advice about the record business and stuff, I'm amazed that getting a record deal is still a thing for some kids. And I'm just thinking, really? Why don't you just go buy a van and get a booking agent and go play?
Because, and keep the money.
Yeah, keep the money and build an audience, because that's really the only way you can do it these days. Oh, but I got 1 million hits. I got 1 million Facebook friends. It's like, okay, cool. When can I go see you play next week? Okay, well, congratulations. Have fun maintaining your Facebook site. I'm going to go do a gig.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just that weird thing. And those things are important. Don't get me wrong. In the past, in interviews and whatnot, I've kind of crapped on social media a little bit, and still will, because I think it's a little bit overblown in terms of what it can do for your career. I mean, I know guys that like dumped Facebook. They're like, I'm not doing this anymore, and they're still working like crazy.
Right.
You know,
right.
old school with a business card and a website.
Yeah.
You know, things were changing at that time, and the writing on the wall, to me, all things pointed to sort of indie, and it's like, okay, well, look, we've got this following. I mean, I think I can say now it's a little past the expiration date, but we were a good band, you know, writing good tunes. And I just thought we could have just kept going on that realm. It's like, okay, well, what's our business plan? Well, we should put a record out every few years. We should tour that record.
Yeah.
Then maybe take a year off and then put another record out and tour that record and take a year off. And I'd do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
No problem. So we were getting into 2005 and we were going to do this reissue thing, which I wasn't totally sold on. I mean, I agreed to it because everybody else was behind it, and it would have happened anyway even if I, you know, made a lot of noise about it. It was still going to come out again. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess it's better than nothing. And then I got a call from, I was sort of thinking about, is this something I want to stick around for? Like, I, it was beginning to be apparent that we weren't going to be working much in 2005. My daughter was born in 2003. Whereas we had done well on the road and with some merchandise, we weren't sharing publishing revenue, which is where most of the money was. Mm-hmm. Didn't recoup on the record because we spent so much money making it,
okay.
you know, and there's a reality for you kids, couple million sold worldwide and no recoup. And besides, that's just like your mechanical or whatever. And
right.
That's not a large, until you're in the Hootie and the Blowfish Alanis Morissette numbers, 30 million, 40 million records, that's great. You retire on that. Yeah. But a couple mil wasn't going to do it at that time. Yeah. So I had some decisions to make, and as I was coming to Nashville, doing these commutes and trying to find work and whatnot, I got a call from Michael Hossack, who was one of the original Doobie Brothers drummers. Yeah. And he was a Vertical fan. And that's how we met. And we did a show out at the Warfield in San Francisco, and we shared a booking agent at the time, and I just called up the agent, and I said, Kevin, invite anybody from the Doobies camp to the Warfield. I'll buy the ticket. If we go over on the list, I'll buy the tickets. Like, I want to meet these guys. They're my heroes. Like, love the Doobie Brothers, you know? Yeah. Anyway, Mike Hossack came out that night, and their manager, Bruce, came out that night, and it was kind of a surreal night. Phil Lesh was there that night.
Oh, man. Yeah.
You think, like, Phil Lesh at a Vertical Horizon concert, and apparently he stood by the soundboard and sung along to, like, every tune. And it was just like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, and then I thought, well, I mean, I listen to all kinds of music. Why wouldn't Phil Lesh?
Sure,
you know?
Sure.
So it was just kind of a neat night, you know, meeting some of these people. And Mike and I just kind of hit it off and became friends. So anyway, Keith Knudsen, who was other Doobie drummer from back in the day, died in February of 2005. Mm-hmm. And I got a call from Mike about a month or so later, and he said, hey, we're going to keep doing two drummers. We're going to have auditions. We're not going to do a cattle call. We're just inviting a couple of people down. You want to come down and play? He had known from being my friend that I was batting around the idea of greener pastures, and this chapter of my life, musically speaking, with Vertical, looks like it's going to close. And I said, yeah, I'd love to come play. And I immediately was like, these guys are 20 years older than I am. They've got guys that they know that they're friends with on the audition, right? You know, who have been working with Crosby, Stills and Nash and Booker T and people like that. I'm like, this will be cool. I'll go out to Burbank on their dime.
You'll have a story to tell.
I'll be in a Doobie Brothers for a half hour. It'll be awesome, you know? Yeah, right. I'll get my picture taken with everybody. I maybe ask for an autograph if it doesn't seem too cheesy, and be done with it, and get to say hi to my friends in Los Angeles for a couple of days. Got the gig. Yeah, I went out and did the audition and just had a ball with it. Like, this is great. And, you know, it was in my benefit that I knew a lot of the material, because there was a song list, like learn these 6 tunes. And it was all the ones you'd sort of expect: Blackwater, China Grove, listen to the music, Long Train. They had a live arrangement of Long Train running they wanted me to learn off of their Live at Wolf Trap DVD. But then Tommy called a tune that wasn't on the audition list, and I think one of the other guys was like, "Hey, that's not on the list," and I was just like, "Hey, it's okay, let's do it."
Yeah.
So it's just that preparedness. I forget what the saying is, but preparedness plus opportunity equals whatever.
Yeah, luck is the equation of but where it fell into play, but
that kind of thing. But so it was just fun, and I auditioned on a Monday. They still had to do a round of guys on Tuesday, so I had to hang around for a day to see what the deal was.
Right.
Now, there was something going on that weekend with Vertical, which I ended up subbing out because I got the gig with the Doobies. They wanted me to stick around for the rest of the week to rehearse.
Oh.
And whoever got the gig was expected to stick around for the rest of the week to rehearse. So I subbed out 2 Vertical gigs that weekend to my buddy Craig McIntyre, who ended up playing with him for a little while. In hindsight, I would have kept those gigs because subbing those gigs out made my relationship with Matt a little contentious for a little while.
Was it just because it was so close to
and
the
I understand
day of
why.
the gig?
Well, it was close to it, and in hindsight, it all worked out, and it's no big deal.
Right,
but
right.
Professionally speaking, I might have handled that a little different. But it was. I was going to say something. I just lost my train of thought. The gig was an opportunity for me, and Matt was the first person I called. Matt Scannell, who's the singer of Vertical Horizon,
right,
and he was the first person I called when I got called for the audition.
Oh,
I said, "Hey, listen, I need to talk to you about something here. Like, I just got called about this. What are we doing this year?" Because he was kind of steering the ship at that point. And he said, "Man, I just don't know that I want to do anything this year." He was a little let down by the failure of the second major label record and the fact that we'd been dropped by the label and stuff like that.
So maybe he sympathized with what you were thinking about or where you were going.
I didn't understand it at the time, and I get it a little bit more now as the primary songwriter in that band. Maybe he had a little more pressure on his shoulders to deliver. Mm-hmm. I thought he delivered stunningly. Mm-hmm. I thought some of the songs on Go were better than Everything You Want. I think it's a better record. My perspective is very different from everybody else's because I was there in the trenches for both of them. But I thought it was a better record and definitely stood more of a chance than it actually got. So in hindsight, I can see how he was bummed out by it. But at the time, I was just kind of like, this sucks. We have a band. We have a brand name. We have a fan base. Let's get on with it, But I hate to use this word because it's a buzzword, but these are the realities of being in bands. There was income inequality there.
Right.
He could afford to take the year off.
Yeah.
I could have afforded at the time to take the year off as well, but my money was kind of like rainy day money, and it wasn't going to be continuous, like publishing money.
Right. Right.
And I had a kid at that point, and it was like, okay. So I initially thought, like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this, and Matt was behind me 100% to go audition for the Doobies. Let me put that out there as well. He said, "Man, it's like a dream gig. You should definitely go." I'm not really sure where I'm sitting with VH and all that stuff either. So cool. So I thought initially, it's kind of funny looking back on it now. I thought, okay, well, if I get this gig, I'll play with the Doobies in 2005, and at the end of the year, Vertical will get back together in a conference room somewhere and talk about what we want to do the following year. And it just didn't happen that way. About a month into my first run with the Doobies, I got a call from the aforementioned Craig McIntyre. He's like, "Dude, what's up?" I said, "Nothing. What's up with you?" He's like, "Matt just called me, asked me if I wanted to do 6 weeks with Vertical."
Wow.
I said, "Go do it, man." They had ended up putting some shows together with the Pat McGee band, and I said, "Well, I'm unavailable, so go for it.
Enjoy.
Yeah, and I had put a statement after I got the Doobies gig. I did put out a statement at the time, effectively telling fans that I was leaving. Because I didn't know what the future held for them, and I figured I'd get at least 5 years out of the Doobies, and it's been 10 now.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy. And Mike has since passed.
Right.
Mike Hosek, and Tony P has been playing drums with us for 5 years now. So it's been a good gig. It's been a rewarding gig, musically speaking, and wish we change the tunes up a little bit, but that's the danger of being in a band that has so many hits.
Yeah, quite the catalog.
So but it's been fun, and I would imagine there's at least a few more years of gas left in the tank. So
I was trying to think of when I saw you the first time I saw you playing with them. We were taking pictures before. You were in Copper Mountain, Colorado. Was it 2000? It was probably shortly after you got the gig. So it might have been.
Yeah, I've been up there a couple of times since.
Okay.
So somewhere between. Mike Hosek was there, I think.
Yeah.
So, and he left the road in 2010, so it was somewhere between 05 and
somebody was sick in the band, and you guys were...
Tommy. Yeah, Tommy had a vocal operation.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would have been like 07 or 08, I think.
Yeah.
So I may have actually sung on that gig. I sang on like 2 gigs, and the headset mic that they had for me was just the most uncomfortable thing ever. And so, I wanted to get a full-on, like, stage mic stand, kind of like what Carter Beauford has.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I could just push out of the way and pull or have a tech swing in when I need
Garth Brooks in it.
What do you think, Jeremy? Could have swung in. My drum tech, Jeremy's here, and he could have swung in a microphone and all that. So he's too busy taking pictures during the gig. But yeah, and it just didn't really work. And, the whole front line was singing, and so I just kind of bagged on it. But I think there were 2 or 3 gigs in my Doobie Brothers career where I actually sang backup.
So do you sing? Do you sing?
I can, yeah. I haven't in a long time. And
did you sing in Vertical Horizon?
I did. I sang when we promoted Go. I sang on a few tunes.
Okay.
To cover some parts, and I sang in high school. I was in chorus and all that stuff, and. I can sing, I can carry a pitch, I can sing harmony. It's been a while, so if I was going to do it, or if I knew I had an audition coming up, I would be sitting in my room with my keyboard singing scales all day, every day, leading up to the thing, just to get it back.
Yeah.
It's one of those muscle things. And Simmons, every once in a while, he'll catch me singing something on the bus, and he'll be like, "Gotta get you a microphone." I'm like, "Come on, man, you got enough singers in this band. You don't need need the drummers singing. Don Henley, Phil Collins. It stops right there.
Let's go back a bit. I want to kind of go back to the beginning and talk about. You said your father was a guitar player, and was that kind of the catalyst to get you interested in music?
It's funny because I've said many times I don't remember music not ever being there.
Right.
So when I was a kid, my dad was a guitar player. He still is a guitar player, a very good guitar player. And he had a jazz gig in New London, Connecticut that they played 5 nights a week for 7 years. Those were the days,
Right, right.
And that's in suburban Connecticut,
Mm-hmm.
But he did that when I was very young. So there was music always playing around in the house, and it was very varied because he liked everything. Mm-hmm. So as a guitar player, he was really into Howard Roberts and Wes Montgomery.
Oh, right.
And then for the rock stuff, he was into the Doobies, and he loved the horn bands, Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Tower. He was into R&B stuff, Rufus, Stevie Wonder. But then he was also into the Eagles, like a lot of the California stuff, Linda Ronstadt. So there was always stuff being played in the house, and he was like a hi-fi guy. He had a really nice turntable and a reel-to-reel tape deck, and the stereo was kind of like his shrine, his domain. And the story goes that he got so fed up with me mucking about with the tapes and stuff like that he just showed me how to use it when I was like 3 years old. Like, okay, this is how you thread the tape through here, and then you put it in the empty reel over here and do that. So, and he didn't want me scratching up his records either.
Right.
So my earliest memories are he was the guy that I became. So there were mixed tapes. He would put his favorite tunes on a tape and run that all day long while he was practicing or doing whatever before he went out to gig. And the earliest songs I remember, oddly enough, he had a mixtape that had Listen to the Music on it by the Doobie Brothers, Summer Breeze, Seals and Croft, Wooden Ships, Crosby, Stills and Nash.
Okay.
Saturday in the Park, Chicago.
Yep.
I mean, these specific songs are the ones that I remember. Tell Me Something Good, like Rufus. These are the specific songs that I remember kind of hearing first. And I can see the living room of the house. And I mean, and we moved out of this house by the time I was 5 years old. But
the impression was made.
Yeah, big time, you know. And I had this show and tell record player. It was like a Fisher Price thing where you put in a little film strip and you ran a 45 and it was connected. So as the story of the 45 went by, the film strip would kind of move and there was a screen in the front.
Oh yeah.
Well, that wouldn't do because Jack Sprat could eat no fat. Like I wasn't very interested in that, but the Elton John "Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player" record was far more interesting to me because Crocodile Rock was on it.
Right.
And so he gave me a couple of his records early on. The CSN record was one of them, the first one with them on the porch, you know. And the Elton record and a couple of Ventures records. He was way into the Ventures.
Oh, cool.
Ventures in Space in particular just flipped me out because it had weird noises on it. And I was just scared that it was scary music. And, you know, I listen to it now and it's like ahead of its time, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Did they do a version of the Star Wars theme?
They might have later in the 70s. Who knows? But they were
I have
a
a recording of that.
surf guitar band.
Yeah. I know. I came across it when I was looking up surf music, and I'm a big Star Wars fan.
Yeah, me too.
And actually, and it's the weirdest, but it's total 70s, but it has all these crazy keyboard sounds.
It's
just it's spacey, and I'm wondering if it's from that.
No, Ventures in Space came out in '67.
Okay.
Mel Taylor on drums, amazing drummer, and everybody should check that record out. It's just got some really trippy, wild Tarantino, what people would think is being a soundtrack to a Tarantino movie kind of music on it. And but you know, the cover fascinated me. It was it was those times, you know, and I distinctively remember hearing the song Daniel by Elton John, and I know now as an adult what it's about, but as a kid listening to it is like, you know, Daniel, my brother, you were older than me. You were older than me. Oh, did something happen to his brother? Like what? You know, because I had a brother. You know, and like what happened? Like this is kind of sad. Like, you know, he's a star in the face of the sky or whatever, and it's just everything about it spoke to me. The words, the music, the cover, and Elton was Elton. So look at this guy,
biggest star in the 70s.
Yeah. So I mean, those are the things that I listened to Ben Caesar's podcast that you did, and he's right on, man. There's the mystique of being a musician and being like a rock and roller is gone. And that's one of the things that drew me to it when I was a kid. Yeah. You know, so
there's something that's drawing, but see, we're the same generation, and as Ben as well. And I've had some younger guys that I've talked to, as we all have talked to, but specifically on this podcast. And it's nice to see that excitement. It's nice to see that interest in music. It's different music sometimes, and we all get to our place, different paths.
The excitement comes from different places now, I think.
It does, and I don't think there's any right or wrong way, because I'm seeing some young people come up and just killing it and sounding great. But there is the romance, and not to sound like an old dude back in my day.
Get off my lawn,
right? But there is. It's funny now because I have kids and they know what vinyl is and they know how to work the turntable as well. Mm-hmm. And we open up the fold out records and we look at the pictures and we talk about the funny clothes they're wearing and the lyrics printed out and all those things. And so my kids are seeing that. I know there's this middle generation that maybe didn't see that or had CDs and things like that. But I'm just trying to figure out if is the younger generation missing anything from this? Or are they just finding a new way to get to where they are?
I think they're probably just finding a new way. And I think anything you can find to get you into something is great. I mean, yeah, it's a drag that when they go see whatever band, let's say Fleetwood Mac, they were just here. Right. If they go see Fleetwood Mac, they know everything about Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
When we went to see Fleetwood Mac, you didn't know anything about them other than what was on the album cover. Mm-hmm. Maybe they did Don Kirshner's rock concert, maybe your parents let you stay up until midnight so you could watch it.
Yeah.
But there was no MTV. Maybe they showed up in one of the 3 music magazines that existed at the time. But if you wanted to see somebody, you had to go see them.
Yeah.
And so when they walked out on stage, it was like, holy crap. Like, there's the Doobie Brothers. It's them.
Right.
They're in my city. They're right there. They're about to play music. I mean, it blew you away the moment they walked on stage. They really were kind of like gods. On the flip side, I would have loved to have watched a drum clinic on YouTube when I was 14 years old.
I know.
I would have loved to have seen cell phone footage of whatever concert was given ever. Like, I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with that because I hate when I see them on stage.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, well, you're missing out on a totally unique experience by sitting there and holding your phone up and watching it through your phone instead of just turning your phone off and like digging what's going on, you know. On the other hand, like I said, it's kind of cool that, I mean, I didn't go see Fleetwood Mac a couple of days ago in Nashville,
right,
so it was cool that I was able to watch a couple of tunes on YouTube.
Well, and do you think it's funny? Well, 2 things. I don't want to get too far off because I want to add to that.
Sure.
But going back, I saw video footage. It was 1976 or 75, the Grammys, and Bowie comes out, and there's this collective reaction from the audience,
right?
And he's looking like an alien, but just so rock and roll. It's so amazing,
No doubt.
And but you hear the audience collectively, oh, they can't believe it, and it's because they're not seeing every little thing about him, and it was probably more impactful that he was there. He was making his groundhog appearance on the Grammys, and he looked amazing.
You said a really, very, very important word there, and it's impactful. So how can you make an impact today when everything is available? When I listen to a Pat Metheny record, I can get transported to a different place. When I go see Pat Metheny and listen to him live, it's that times 100 for me.
Well, and hey, I agree with you 100%. But I'm wondering, is there an example in pop music where that would be more applicable? Only because when I think of that genre of improvisation, yeah, you get the record, you're capturing the moment.
Sure.
Even though Pat Metheny's a little bit more arranged than most jazz that genre, but at the same time, yeah, I've seen Pat Metheny twice, and just you've got to go to experience what's going on beyond the record in that genre. But for people that are trying to break into pop culture, and we're talking about pop music that has to sell in order to make money, if you're doing that route.
Yeah, I mean, well, to me, that's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a totally different animal between playing music and being a musician and being a celebrity or pop culture icon.
Right.
I think.
So going back to being a musician, which is kind of what I think this is about, which I think.
God, I hope so.
No. I mean, where my interests lie, and which is kind of the reason why I started this is as a musician. And our interest in honing our craft and being better musicians, and everyone that's probably interested in what we're talking about. That's what it's about. We're not trying to become superstars here. We're trying to like how do you become
a working drummer?
A working drummer.
See what I did there?
Very good. In amidst all the noise,
I think the most important thing is to tune out the noise. I think the most important thing is to and again we'll go back to Uncle Pat here, Mr. Metheny, who always says in interviews, and I kind of steal this from him because I think it's great. Decide what it is that you want to do within the realm of music, and then just go do that. Just tune out just go do what it is you want to do, and do it 100% to the best of your ability, and things will happen for you, and you will work.
Yeah.
I think if you try to cater to tastes, if you try to be what you think other people want you to be, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Like, go do something else.
Yeah.
But if you decide, like, I want to be a working drummer, go be a working drummer. And then people say, okay, well, how do you do that? And it's like, you know what? If there was a formula, it would be bottled and sold, and everybody would be doing it. Right. There is no formula. The most important thing to do that is to go play, and go play with as many people as possible.
Right.
Take every gig. because I never got a gig from Facebook. I never got a gig from having a business card. I never got a gig from having a bang up website. I got a gig because I got recommended by somebody else that I played music with.
Right.
And that's how you do it.
I've got a perfect question for you that is related to what you were just talking about. There was a question. There was an online discussion with drummers here in town, and somebody posed the question: is it worth videotaping yourself doing drum covers?
There's two ways to look at it. Is one, anything you have that's out there that you can direct somebody to is probably a good thing. It's one thing to sit down and play along with a record. It's another thing to sit down and play with a group of people, and when you have to react off of one another.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get a gig.
Yeah.
It's another thing if you're auditioning for an original band and they want to see what, if I had a band and I needed a drummer and I wanted to see how they thought musically within the realm of my music, I really wouldn't give two shits if they played the hell out of Rosanna, because it has nothing to do with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So, again, it's a mixed feelings thing. It's hard for me to say because...
And maybe it's early on. Because this is kind of a newish...
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is, all I have to go on is my experience. And my experience has been just playing with people.
Yeah.
Playing with as many people as possible. All different styles of music, whatever you like. Again, what do you want to do? Do that.
Yeah.
If you want to make a YouTube cover of a song, do that. Who knows? Maybe it will be something. Because there are so many of them, it becomes part of the noise we were talking about earlier.
I talked to Steve Eby yesterday, and we were talking about drummers that work in bands and record, and then there's drummers that do clinics, and he goes, I call them the drum heroes, and then the working drummers, the two distinctions. And now there seems to be an offshoot of that. The person, and I think even Ben gets into that a little bit, where there's the player that they don't work with a lot of people. Maybe they're not. Maybe I don't know what the goal is, and maybe it's a new part of the industry that's being created where they're doing videos online. It's not necessarily for students. It's not necessarily for getting gigs. It's So I don't know. This has just kind of been a newer phenomenon, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with our conversation with you directly.
It's okay.
But I'm posing that because of your experience. And
I think people need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some of this stuff, and for a young drummer coming up that doesn't know anything about anything, some of that stuff is wrong. There's some wrong information out there, and
well, that's a very good point.
Better ways of doing things and different ways of doing things. The it's the drawback of the world we live in today, and I think that you could take that video thing and that drummer career thing and mold it into music as well, and it's become so easy to record. You can make a recording in your living room. That doesn't mean it's going to be any good. If somebody gives me a stack of wood and a box of nails and a nail gun, theoretically, I could build a house. It's not going to come out very good because I don't know anything about woodwork and physics and building a house to build a good house.
Yeah.
And people forget that.
Well,
just because you have the tools to do something doesn't mean that you can do it. It doesn't mean that you're particularly any good at it. And then the other thing I say is, what makes you think that people are going to be interested? Well, you start to get followers and stuff like that. But again, what are your credentials? What are your...
Are they building credentials by getting followers?
I don't know. I'm not so sure I'd want to take the advice of somebody that has never gigged with other musicians before.
Sure.
Learning a groove from a song is one thing, but learning how to play music is really different from learning how to do 50 ways to leave your lover.
Yeah.
Plenty of people can learn that and do well with it and knock it out of the park. But when you're sitting with a group of musicians playing that song, is it grooving? Is it happening? Are the changes correct? It's a really strange area. And I think it's great that all that stuff's out there, but I really think that people should tread lightly because it can be really easy to get lost in, I mean, let's face it, it's called virtual reality for a reason.
Yeah.
And spend more time in reality, going to see bands, playing again with as many people as you can play with. I mean, I can't stress that enough.
Yeah.
You know?
So I want to go back to what got you into just playing drums, because your dad is a guitar player, so
Yeah.
why not guitar? And
Well, it's funny, one of the earliest pictures of me with an instrument was with a guitar, but it just didn't take. And, you know, I had
see a picture of that? It sounds really cute.
yeah, right. Well, I had the wooden spoons and the Quaker Oats box and all that, and that's really what I dug. And I think, you know, my dad just recognized that. And then I remember one day, I think I was 5 or 6, we were driving by a yard sale, and there was a little set of drums out front, right up the road. And by a little set of drums, I mean little. It was a kick drum with a cymbal mounted on the top of it and a snare drum.
Yeah.
That's it. And I talked my dad into walking up the street and buying them for me. And so we did it, and I started taking lessons at the local music shop and started learning how to read and things like that. And those were good experiences. And there was a guy that played with my dad named John Pescatello. And so to be super young, like 6 years old, 7 years old, wanting to learn how to play the drums and knowing a drummer was like wild. I mean, he was like a rock star to me. You know, he was like the guy, you know. And this is the guy that passed away later on, and when I was 14, and I ended up taking his place in my dad's group, amazing. And that was kind of like my first gig. And you know, I'm still very close to his daughter today, and good friends with the family. And I wish he was around to see some of this and to share some of this, because I learned a lot from him, you know, about playing the drums and different approaches and stuff. One song in particular is Doobie Brothers song, Take Me in Your Arms. I remember trying to play that song, and it has a really quick 16th note pattern on the hi-hat, like Tom Sawyer style, you know. I just couldn't do it. My little 8-year-old arm couldn't keep up with that. And he just said, well, you know, one way you could do it is like this. And he showed me two hands on the hi-hat, you know? And it's like, yeah, you kind of miss a beat when you hit the snare, but you could still groove it that way. And I remember this specifically, you know, and it's little things like that are really cool. And again, just knowing a drummer was really cool, having access to that, you know? And so, yeah, I just, you know, and lessons were here and there for a little while because my folks didn't have a ton of money. But I also grew up in Connecticut, and it was at a time where, I mean, I was able to join band in 4th grade. We had a symphonic thing, you know. Oompa, oompa, we're playing the Happy Days theme. Everybody's happy, you know. But it was a great experience because I started to learn what it's like to play in an ensemble with other people, keeping the reading chops up, you know, and participating in music daily. So, I mean, what wasn't to like, you know? And as I progressed into high school, I had to gig with my dad's band for a while, which was cool. And I mean, the first time I played with them, I was in 8th grade, and we played this bowling banquet. And my math teacher happened to be on the bowling team.
Oh, cool.
And she was kind of she was a decent looking lady, and no teacher crush or anything, but like, you know, she came up to me and was like, oh, I didn't know you played the drums. This is great. You play so good. And it was like, okay, well, there's the one factor that people get into this for, right? And then at the end of the night, my old man handed me $100.
What?
14 years old. I'm like, okay, there's another factor that people get into this for. And the main factor was I just had a blast playing Man Eater and, you know, I Ran by Flock of Seagulls and Proud Mary and my version of Swing for In the Mood during the dinner hour and all the various hits of the day. You Should Hear How She Talks About You by Melissa Manchester and whatnot. I was playing drums in a band, and I was playing with my dad, which was cool. And
Only you played "Don't Stand So Close to Me" by Police with your math teacher right there.
Yeah, we know. Yeah,
This is perfect.
That would have been crazy, right? But I mean, it was a big moment. I remember driving back home from that with my dad, just being on and the gig was at some lodge in the woods somewhere in like Chesterfield, Connecticut, or something like that, and I just remember this total feeling of elation, like this is awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you ever feel like you're you hold on to that feeling? You're constantly looking for that, or not looking for it, but it's like you know what it's like.
Yeah.
To get that satisfaction, that thing that completely changed your life, that feeling that in the midst of the realities of life, the realities of the music business being what they are, your experiences with the original band, record labels, and all that stuff, and now playing with the band that you grew up with, it's like it just seems to me that it's enabled you to put your priorities in a place where you're like, no. This is what's important to me. I know what it's like to feel good, to have this experience that's motivated me to like do something that's just dangerously irresponsible as a career, because this is what I need.
Yeah, and what it is it's a continuation of those experiences. Yeah. You know, I mean, you know, we work at what we do, and we work very hard.
Yeah.
And like any other job, some days you don't feel like going to work, but you still have to go to work and make it happen.
Yeah.
And so the little things that I always remember are, I always pretend that there's at least one person in the audience who is paying ridiculous, meticulous attention to what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Whether it's a drummer or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let that person down.
Yeah.
And hopefully I can make somebody walk out of a gig with the feeling that I get walking out of gigs. Like, that was awesome. I want to go home and practice or whatever.
Right.
Realistically, you don't always get there, but I try to do that every night. I try to just do that, There was a great interview with Brian Blade, fantastic drummer.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm getting this right. This is the way I remember it anyway. He was talking with Wayne Shorter about music, and there's so many great Wayne Shorter quotes. There should be a bathroom book, like everything I need to know about life I learned from Wayne Shorter. You know what I mean? And he was talking about those nights. He's like, I just go up there and with a full tank, and I just empty it out, and sometimes at the end of the night I've just got nothing left, and Wayne said, why don't you go up empty and fill it?
Holy moly.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, man, just get chills now talking about it. But I think that was the context of the quote. But I mean, so I try to think a little bit like that. It's like, okay, I'm going up to play China Grove for the 1,000,000th time. What can I get out of it tonight that I haven't gotten out of it before? Is it one fill in one spot that I've never played before? Is it, and that can be difficult sometimes when you're doing it night after night.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
I'd love to have a sit down with guys like Todd Zuckerman and, guys that are in the same boat. It's like, we're playing with these sort of older artists who've been around for a long time, and there are songs that are expected to be played.
Right.
And we're out there every year. It's not like, Neil going out and doing a tour and playing Tom Sawyer again and then taking a year and a half off and then going out and do it again. That's a totally different experience.
Sure.
So, I'd be a little curious as to some other guys' take on it too. But you try to find something every night that reminds you, like, yeah, man, this is why I do this.
Well, and kind of going on your point about playing the same song over and finding something in it. I remember when I was working at a drum store in Columbus Pro Percussion, and we're all sitting around, and we're in our early 20s talking about, oh yeah, I got like 6 songs to learn for this weekend. Oh yeah, I got 12 songs to learn, and I got all these new songs.
I got to rock.
Yeah.
I'm not gigging this weekend. Wah, wah, wah.
So we're just talking about, and the owner comes in, who's an incredible player. He says, you know what, playing new songs, that's easy. Playing the same material and making it fresh and exciting every night is the challenge.
Yeah.
He shut us down real quick.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my God, he's right.
Yeah, and it's the difference.
Now I get it.
It's knowing the stuff too. I mean, I'll often go back and reference some of the original recordings if I feel like I'm getting stale on something, and and I see that around town a lot. I see, if you're going down Broadway, and I mean Broadway's an easy target, but you're going down Broadway and somebody's playing Sweet Home Alabama for the umpteenth time, and you're just sitting there and you're just like, you're playing it wrong, and it's a case of, we've all heard Sweet Home Alabama 100 times. Yeah. How many times have we listened to Sweet Home Alabama? Yeah. I mean, do you know what the kick drum pattern is for that song? So that kind of thing. It's the difference between hearing and listening.
That's a tough one. I mean, I totally get your point. To me, that's a tough one because it's like that song, Brown Eyed Girl. They're really great songs. Yeah. They really are good songs.
No doubt.
They've just been worn out so much.
Well, that's the thing. It's like,
Whose fault is that?
I'm not above any gig. I don't think that I'm above any gig. But I really don't want to play Brown Eyed Girl ever again unless I'm playing it with Van Morrison.
Yeah.
Then I'll play it. Yeah. And I'll play the hell out of it. Yeah. Pink Houses, same deal.
Oh, yeah.
I'd rather play Pink Houses on guitar than on drums. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I've done it enough times on drums, Sure. But then again, like, I say that, and like, we are creatures of habit. If somebody called me for a gig tomorrow and I wasn't doing anything, and it's with people I haven't really played with before, and I know that they're decent, I'm going to go play. Yeah. And if they call Pink Houses, guess what? I'm playing Pink Houses. Yeah. But it's cool because I haven't played it in a few years. So, just don't ask me to do it again next week.
I've got it charted out if you need it.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. Cool.
Actually, I do, but that was from a really long time ago.
Of course. and what a great, and that's a great way to hone things too.
Oh, I know.
Take something you've heard a million times and just sit at home and write a chart.
What has your experience been with the Doobies as far as how much flexibility how much trust do they have? I mean, obviously 10 years, so they've got trust in you. Mm-hmm. But when you first started, you were saying, these guys are 20 years older than me. They have all these other players that they can call. But something about what you've been doing is obviously working, and you're saying, hey, can I try this different fill on China Grove? But there's a history there. Mm-hmm. And what is their take on how, or what's your relationship with them musically as far as retaining that history? Or
they've never said a word to me about like what to play. I think we've discussed a couple of sections a couple of different times, and it was referenced like, back in the old days, Hartman used to play mallets on this part on the toms. Do you think maybe you could do that? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll give it a go. And I gave it a go at first, and it didn't really feel right, and so I took it out. And I went back to playing sticks. I took the whole tom-tom part out and just grooved over that section. Mm-hmm. And I was probably about a month later, and Simmons came to me again and said, hey, man, I'd really like to try to get the mallet thing on there, And I said, all right, well, give me a week, give me a few gigs to try to settle into it. I said, when we did it a while ago, it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel natural. And this was one of those cases where I went back and listened to the original recording again.
How many years had you been? How long had you been playing with them at this time?
This was a few years into it.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so at first he didn't mind that it wasn't there, and then he kind of missed it. Like, and he was probably like the rest of us. Sometimes it's just like, okay, what can we do to give this section a little extra? I'm missing a little lift in this section, Mm-hmm. And so I went back and it wasn't a part that was on the record. It was something that he did live. Mm. So I just kind of came up with something that kind of put my spin on it in a way that it was comfortable and worked for me, and he loved it. So we left it in. Nice. And it's two drummers. So the whole show's to a click. Oh. So the whole show's to a click. So Tony and I are never that far off. Yeah. I mean, a couple flams here and there is just natural when you're I think when you're playing with another drummer, because you feel things a little bit differently. Yeah. But for the most part, we're right on with it, and there are elements of the show where I know he's taking that fill, I'm taking this fill. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we go back and forth. Mm-hmm. We do some fills in unison. We do a couple of cool Phil Collins, Chester Thompson things where we're playing, like digga-dagga, 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 back and forth,
cool.
which is fun. But it never gets out in like King Crimson Land or anything like that. I mean, it's the Doobie Brothers,
Yeah.
It's a band that, quite frankly, doesn't really need two drummers, but they've kind of always had it, and I guess it's a thing. So that's where we're at,
Yeah.
So yeah, Tony and I, and then every once in a while, Tony and I'll put our heads together and again try to sort of refresh things a little bit and keep things going. So, it's interesting playing with another drummer all the time.
Right, I know I've never had the opportunity to do that, and Keo Stroud talks about that. He grew up playing he calls it double drums,
right?
The whole thing. Is that the technical term for it?
I think so.
That's express my ignorance.
No, I've heard it called double drumming, and it seems to be a 70s thing, really. I mean, you think about the Allmans, the Dead. I think 38 Special had two drummers for a little while, and it never seemed to me to make any sense. The two guys that do it well now, I think, are J.J. Johnson and Tyler Greenwell and Derek Truck's band.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But, they're sitting right next to each other, right on top of each other. There's no click on that gig. It's roots rock. That would be a fun thing to do. And then like in Crimson, like when Bruford and Pat Mastelletto were playing together, I mean, I don't think they ever played the same thing together, and when I saw Bruford do the Yes reunion thing in the 90s with Alan White, I mean, that was more of a, one guy sort of took the lead and the other guy kind of decorated. Is what that was. Like,
it almost seemed like more for the fans. Like
very much, I think so, very much so. And Bruford played on the tunes that he played on, and Alan played on the tunes that he played on, and they sort of decorated here and there. And you get some of the big crashes were bigger because you had two drummers. It's a cool thing to see, though. That tour was pretty cool.
I bet. My first concert ever was Yes.
Oh, no kidding.
But it was Alan White. And I think my first drum clinic was Alan White.
We played on Imagine, man.
Oh, I know.
It's crazy.
I know. People forget that.
And he did the double drum thing, too, with Joe Cocker.
Really?
Mad Dog's an Englishman. Yeah, with Keltner, I think. And,
I think Keltner has a way of playing double drums that's really... Like with that... the concert for George... where Keltner was there and Ringo's playing, and there's it's like there's three drummers going on at once. Keltner's back there hitting floor tom and snare drums with mallets, and just he's decorative in his approach to that kind of thing, which was amazing. Speaking of Alan White, I yak about drums and music, and my wife always says, Alan White, is he related to Barry White? It could not be further from the...
Fair question.
It is. It's a good thing. She says thank you. I was digging around because a lot of the people that I've started interviewing are usually players that I've known for years, but you're one of the guys that I don't really know a whole lot about, or just met briefly once before, which kind of is fun for me because it's like it gives me an excuse to kind of really dig in and kind of see. And I've seen you play a couple of times and just killing it, man. Just sounding
Thank
great.
you. Thank you.
For sure. When I was surfing around and kind of looking at seeing if you had any instructional videos on YouTube, actually,
there's a couple things up there.
Yeah,
nothing major. But
well, there's a old Real Feel warm up thing that you did.
Sure.
And this is I guess this is more of a personal question because you're like I came up with this stick pattern from a Pat Metheny First Circle.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Pat Metheny fan.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm like, what? What's that from?
Yeah.
And vinyl. And I have that on vinyl, actually. What First Circle, the song?
Yeah, I was just sitting around one day and it was on, and it's one of my favorite songs ever of all time, First Circle. And it's this weird thing that's in like 22. I forget what the grouping is, but I was just sitting around listening to it one day. And I love paradiddles. And I just happened to be sort of banging on my leg a little bit.
My name is Ed, and I like paradiddles.
That's right. Hello, Ed. So I was just kind of playing on my leg and listening, and before I knew it, I was kind of paradiddling my way through
life.
First Circle. And I was like, oh, this could be a cool little sort of warm-up exercise, And that's, I still use it
Yeah.
I mean, not all the time, but I still use it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the accents of the song, I don't know if this will pick up on the table,
Maybe.
but it's the main part, the main rhythmic theme of the song is That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So I just had been sitting around and I was just alternating the accents on my hand and just letting my hands naturally go the way they were going to go to get to where they needed to be for the accent. And it just came out like, with the thing. It's on YouTube. You can find it. But it just seemed like a neat little thing, and so
it's a really specific question.
Yeah. Well, when the Evans guys were like, "Hey, can you say a little something about the pads here?" It was backstage at a gig, and it was just a little thing for their website, and I was like, "Well, yeah." And there's another paradiddle exercise that I knew from my drum corps days, which lasted a year. I wish they had lasted a little bit longer, but a year was all we could squeeze out financially. But there was a paradiddle exercise that a guy had that stuck with me over the years because I just thought it was so musical. So I still put Mike Hossack and I taught it to Mike, and he and I used to play it together before shows. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah,
that'd be fun having that other drummer, because that's the thing.
He was into the corps thing too. He was in the Navy back in the day, and he marched with a corps. This is all pre DCI. I mean, Mike was significantly older than I was, but he marched with the corps around Jersey, where he grew up. So he was into all that stuff too. And he kind of followed DCI and stuff like that.
I see. And I've said this before. It's one thing I kind of missed out on. I feel like. Can we kind of zoom through? I want to go through.
Sure.
Like what
we've been bouncing all over the place, man. We can talk about whatever you want.
No, it's really great. No, I kind of want to actually. I kind of want to lead up to what led to your Vertical Horizon gig. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great.
Okay. What led to that?
The gig?
Yeah.
That was
from Connecticut.
Okay.
And you're with your dad's band.
Okay, so I graduated from high school. I did not go to college right after high school because, again, it was a case of money. And so after a few years of kicking around New London, Connecticut, I played in a great band called Absolute R&B. Remember all the Absolute Vodka ads that were out back in the day? Well, we set up a band called...
You're from New London?
I was born in New London, yeah.
Okay.
And lived in the area.
I was there not too long ago. All around it. Loved it.
Oh, yeah. It's a cool place.
Yeah,
it's a cool place. I think if somebody sunk some money into it, it could be like Portsmouth, New Hampshire or something. But again, that's another podcast.
Right.
But save New London. I had learned when I was like 20 years old that I could apply for financial aid as an independent. So it was that weird thing, like if I applied for it and reported my parents' income, I could get some assistance, but not enough for me to go. And of course, I wanted to go to the University of Miami, which was like, hey, let's find the most expensive school that you could possibly go to, Yeah. But it was the music program that had such a reputation that I wanted to go there. And I was done with winter in Connecticut. And I had to get out. I mean, it was very much all the stuff you hear in songs. Like, I'm in a small town, and I want to go where the bright lights are and
pink houses.
And go make something happen, and it's just not going to happen in East Lyme, Connecticut. As great as it is, and it's home. Every time I'm there, I feel like I'm home, and I hope to live there again someday. If not during winter, we've covered that already. But part-time would be great if that's ever a possibility. But my mom still lives up there. I still have family back there. I still go there. It's where I feel at home when I'm walking around like Niantic, Connecticut. Niantic, East Lyme's like the same town.
Okay.
I feel home.
Yeah.
And especially as I get older, like, it's where it's my happy place, So I knew I had to get out.
Right.
And I wanted to get out. It was, I knew what I wanted to do, and it just wasn't going to happen in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So I realized that you could apply for financial aid as an independent. And, I wasn't making any money. I was kicking around, working as a janitor in a hospital and playing with the band, which was a horn band. We played Stax, we played Motown, we played Love Shack, we played everything. And that was a great learning experience too. And we gigged a lot, so that was pretty cool. But that didn't pay all the bills. So I had to sweep the floor at the hospital so I could play drums. You do what you got to do. So I get into Miami, and somehow I find a way to like get there. So I land in Miami on my 21st birthday, 1990, August 18th. If anybody's keeping score and wants to buy me a gift,
Duly noted.
I land in Miami with a suitcase full of clothes and a suitcase full of like stuff, like my alarm clock, my stick bag, whatever. I don't even have drums.
Oh, really?
I didn't go to orientation. Like, I don't know anything about anything other than this music school is badass. I got in. I found a way to pay for a semester. I'm going.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens, you know?
Yeah.
And then I just got there, and it was just the most amazing, eye-opening thing. And a couple of things happened for me when I was there. The first thing that happened to me, which I'm so glad it did, was I wasn't... egomaniac's not the right word, but I thought I had my stuff together. I played in a band in Connecticut, played a bunch of different stuff, could play along with First Circle and things like that. And I thought, okay, I got some skills here. Let's see, maybe I could learn some other things. I'd like to learn more about jazz and stuff like that. And I got there, and like guys that were like 17-year-old freshmen like just dropped my jaw. Like,
wow.
I've got a lot to learn, a lot. And I picked that up right away, and I'm glad I picked it up right away, because it was like, okay, time to get to work. Like, you know. So, yeah, about halfway through the first semester, I sent home for my drums. Like, hey, it'd probably be a good idea to have some drums down here if I'm majoring in music. You know what I mean? I majored at first, and ended up getting my degree in music ed. And I kind of did that on purpose. I had some theory classes in high school, but hadn't, I'd been out of high school now for a few years and hadn't really had a chance to apply any of that stuff.
Okay.
So I needed a refresher with that, but I wanted to learn how to play other instruments because I didn't want to just be like drummer guy.
Yeah.
I wanted to be like a musician,
right.
you know? And I didn't think I was going to be a virtuoso on all these instruments, but I figured if I learned enough about different instruments and how they interact with each other and all this other stuff, I could apply some of those principles to playing music. And
sure.
I've always just sort of thought of myself as a musician who plays the drums and not like as a drummer,
right.
You know? As the guy that hangs out with musicians,
right, exactly.
as the joke goes.
Exactly.
So I did, and I learned how to play these other instruments. But the biggest thing that happened for me at Miami was the exposure to people and playing with a million different people in a million different scenarios.
Right.
And watching people play and listening to what people had to say. It was almost more of an education outside of the classroom than it was inside of the classroom.
Right.
And there were cats there when I was there, man. Jason Sutter, Brendan Buckley, Jeff Babco, Kevin Stevens. I mean, all these guys. Derek Franks, a LA bass player, was there when I was there. Did a really funny New Year's gig with him once when we were down there. Like, we played like Spain by Chick Corea and all that stuff.
Wow.
And then someone asked if we could play New York, New York. None of them knew it. And I was like embarrassed. I'm like, you guys don't know New York? Because I'd been in the wedding band with the old man, you know? It was a standard, you know? But all these guys were at Miami when I was there, and it was just a great experience. So flash forward, I go through school, and I played in my first original band when I was in Miami, a band called Jennifer Culture, which was like a funk rock kind of thing. Which was kind of hip at the time. Okay. I have some recordings. Maybe I'll play them for somebody someday. Yeah. But they're pretty cool. It was a cool band. Still in touch with the guys, and very influential guys in my life. Like, you know, the experience
that can happen. Yeah,
amazing.
Awesome.
We flyered cars, like the whole deal. You know, graduated from college, moved to Boston. I figured, okay, Boston was kind of done with Miami. The Julio gig was taken. The Buffett gig was taken. I'm going to Boston. It's closer to home.
Miami Sound Machine had excessive amount of members.
Well, I went to Boston with the idea I wanted the Amy Mann gig.
Oh, yeah.
She had just put out a record called Whatever, which is a fantastic album. Yeah. And I didn't know what her situation was at all. And it's funny, years later I met and her drummer, John Sands, who's a great drummer. And I went up there with the idea that I was going to try to do that. So I would do this thing where I'd like write letters, make phone calls, like to the management office. For example, I the B-52s are going on tour. Well, I know that they're regular drummer Zach Alford is going on the road with Springsteen from reading it in the trades.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to call the B-52's management and see if they have a drummer. Well, what I didn't realize at the time is when you read something in the magazine, like that happened like 5 months ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that at the time. I thought, okay, well, they got this information last month and then they put it on the newsstand, which, you know, remember I did my Modern Drummer interview and it came out like 7 months later or something like that, you know? So, but I would make these phone calls. I mean, the day that I read that Dave Abruzzese got fired from Pearl Jam, I called the Pearl Jam office that day. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, that's not how you do it. But I was just whatever it took, you know, making a YouTube video of a drum cover. Like, that was my YouTube cover back then, making these little phone calls.
That was your voice.
So I get up to Boston and I'm knocking around a little bit, playing here and there. Nothing really major. I'm working for Borders, Books and Music, right? Didn't want to get the teaching gig because I was afraid I was gonna. You
heard that the guy in the history part of Borders you read it in the trades and you called Borders and said you need a salesman there.
yeah, exactly. Well, I had worked for Borders in Miami, so I transferred to a store up in Boston, and they had a music store there, which the store in Miami did not. CDs and whatnot. So I went to work up there, and while I was up there, they had a monthly co-op where it was like the sale CDs, like new music type thing. Mm-hmm. And this record came in by this band Vertical Horizon, and it was called Running on Ice. And I remember when I first saw it, it had like a finger paint of a VH on it, and it was like, oh God, Van Halen's gonna sue them, like whatever. Yeah. So anyway, like that later that day or the next day, my boss said, "Hey, remember that VH band, that Van Halen?" Yeah. He's like, "They're local. Like the guy's mom was in the store making sure we had the CD and all that stuff." Yeah. And so I'm like,
moms do.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool. You know, maybe we should open it up and play it." And yeah, well, we didn't get around to it. But later that day, Matt Scannell, who was one of the singers and songwriters of Vertical Horizon, one of the guitar players, called the store and talked to my boss, who was a guy named Dave, and said, "Hey, you know, my mom was in the store and she said you were really nice to her, and well, we're playing at this club in town called Mamakin tonight. Can I put you on the list?" I mean, they were doing all their own PR and stuff like that. So Dave got on the list with a +1, and I became the mysterious +1. Very good. And it's funny, but my wife, now ex-wife, had to talk me into going out that night. Like, I'll never forget that. I owe a lot to her for a lot, because she was very supportive of everything. But she said, "Look, you've been talking about trying to learn more about the scene and getting more involved in the scene. It's a free ticket. Just go." Right, you know? Right. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go.
You never know.
So I went down to Mamakin on Lansdowne Street near Fenway Park. And again, I worked in a record store, total music nerd, reading Billboard, reading Mojo, blah, blah, blah. I had never heard of these guys, right? I think it was a Wednesday or a Thursday night. The club is packed. And everybody is singing along to like every song. And not only that, but the songs are like really good. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, like who are these guys, you know? Yeah. While I was at the show, I ran into a guy, a drummer friend of mine, that was living in Boston that I knew from Miami. It was Jason Sutter. Okay. Jason Sutter had moved to Boston. He was playing with a woman named Juliana Hatfield. Yes. Yeah. And I had seen Jason on like Conan O'Brien, and he kind of was one of the first guys to kind of bust out a little bit. And when he was at Miami, he was a graduate student. Well, he did his undergrad at North Texas. Okay. The drummer that was playing with Vertical Horizon at the time, who only played with them for a little while because he didn't like life on the road, was a guy that Jason knew from North Texas. And Jason knew that this guy had given his notice to the band. Oh, okay. Jason also knew that I was looking for a gig. Yeah. And he's like, "You should talk to these guys. Like, you'd be perfect for this. Like, they asked me to do it, but I can't do it. I'm doing Juliana." Yeah. So I talked to them that night, and that led to sending in a tape, which led to an audition, which led to me getting a gig. Okay. That's the short version. But it's because Matt's mom decided to come into Borders.
That's serendipitous. It's crazy. And there's times that it's like, I don't feel like going out. And, And especially in a town where if they don't see you, you don't exist.
Exactly. And that's those are the things that you have to do. And again, those are the X factors that get you gigs that you can't learn from a book, that you can't learn from having a killer website. Like, that's how gigs happen.
Right.
It's tip of your tongue stuff. Yeah. People say, I'll meet somebody for coffee that I just met in town and they want a little advice or whatever. And I'm like, hey, I'm good. Free cup of coffee. It's cool. I got nothing else going on today. And, and they always end everything. Well, if you hear of anything, let me know. It's like, man, I've never even seen you play. And this is not personal, but I'm not going to recommend you for a gig. I've never seen you play. I've never heard you play. And like, you can fix anything on the internet. That's another thing too about those videos.
That's true.
That's
true.
If you're
That's a good point.
If it's not happening and it's not really grooving, you can just beat detective it and you're good.
Well, that's a good point.
I don't think people. I think that's the extreme cases. But,
well, okay. For sure.
I don't think that's what people are doing. But you can do that.
Yeah.
So I take that stuff with a grain of salt. I mean, and so, I've got like I have like a 3-guy short list in Nashville who are the guys I'm going to recommend if I can't do something. And somebody says, well, do you know of anybody else?
Yeah.
And if I'm not thinking of those guys, I'm thinking about, okay, did I run into somebody last night? Oh, I just talked to Keo. He's off this week. Call this guy. Travis McNabb just called me about having lunch. Call Travis, see if he's available. Like,
but
that's how those things happen.
Sure.
Yeah, he's in the forefront of my brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, it's like, I'm only going to give a couple of names. So if you're not in that top 2, or I didn't run into you last night, or you didn't blow me away when I saw you play for the first time this week, sorry, but my reputation's on the line as well, recommending somebody for a gig.
Sure.
Sure.
You have to recommend the best person for those gigs.
It's a tough thing, Yeah. So it was cool to run into Jason that night, and Jason introduced me to Darren, who was the drummer at the time, a guy named Darren, and Jason basically said, this guy can play. Now, I don't know if any conversations were had between him and Matt when I wasn't around, but maybe he's like, well, Sutter said this guy's worth giving a shot or whatever.
Yeah.
But I talked to Matt on the phone, and we liked a lot of the same music, and I sent him a tape of an original song that I had written and cut the drums for, which I had sent to Amy's people when I was trying to get Amy Van's van.
Nice.
And it's funny, years later, we did a VH1 awards show, and at the post-show party, Amy was there, and she was there with her manager, who's this guy, Michael Hausman, who was the drummer for Till Tuesday.
Yeah.
And he got into management and managed Amy at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I told him the story. Like, I sent a tape and everything. He's like, I probably still have it in a file somewhere,
That's great.
And I was like, wow, that's crazy, But, so I ended up auditioning at Matt's mom's house in Worcester, Massachusetts, in the basement. And you talk about auditions, it was just a case of being uber prepared. They said, well, we'd like to start off with, there's this newer tune that we've been working on, and we just kind of want to play it, and you just play like what you feel. And in my head, I'm like, that's how you audition somebody for an original act.
See how
you throw something at them that they have not heard, and see how you play together, what kind of things come out of it, how it feels, like that kind of thing. Then we went through a few songs from the record, and they said, well, is there anything you want to do that we haven't done? Well, let me back up just a little bit. So the next day after the concert, we went into the store and opened up the record. And the first tune came on, and it was kind of cool and had some really cool drumming on it. And it was like, Under the Table and Dreaming by Dave Matthews Band had come out at that point. And he's like, wow, he sounds a little bit like the guy from Dave Matthews Band. So I go to the credits and I'm checking it out. Sure enough, it's Carter Beauford.
Oh, really?
Matt and Keith went to Georgetown, which is where they met.
Yep.
And while they were there, they knew a guy named Michael McDonald, unrelated to Doobies Michael McDonald.
Okay.
Michael was a tour manager for Dave Matthews Band, and has since gone on to start like ATO Records and stuff like that. So, and he manages John Mayer now. Michael does. So, or he used to. I don't think he does anymore, but he manages some big people. And they said to Michael, hey, do you think Carter would play on this? And I said, well, it couldn't hurt to send him a tape.
Right.
You know, and Carter's name was just starting to show up everywhere because that record was all over the place, and the drumming. I mean, I'm sorry, he's the star of that band. You know, I think a lot of people go to see that band to dance, and he's the reason why they dance.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So they were able to get Carter on some of the tracks for that record. So that was kind of cool. So before I left the audition, they said, well, is there anything you'd like to do? I was like, well, I'd love to play this song called Answer Me, which had sort of a 50 Ways kind of thing on it, and then bounced into a regular groove for the chorus, and it was very Carter-esque. And we hadn't done too much of that, and I wanted to sort of show them that I could play this way.
It was the more difficult of the material.
I could play this way if need be, and they were like, "Oh, that's a tall call." Like they hadn't really played that song much.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was because of a drummer thing or they just didn't think of it, but so they had to kind of. It's funny. At one point, they were doing something.
He's auditioning us.
Well, that's kind of what happened. It was like, no. It goes to it goes right into the chorus there. It's extended the second time around, and they were like, oh, this guy's telling us what to do, you know. But it's weird, you know. You never know what's going to make an impression. I found out after I got the gig that one of the first things they noticed as I was loading my stuff in, and I mean, I had to be driven to Worcester because I didn't have a car at this point. I was living in downtown Boston. You don't need a car,
right? Yeah.
You know, my friend Casey drove me out to the audition. She had a pickup truck, and I just kind of threw my drums in the back, and I had some cases, you know, they were beat up like old Humes and Berg type kind of things. They were beat up that I bought off a guy in Miami, but I had cases, and I found out actually, I think a couple of years later that, you know, one of the first thoughts that Matt had was like, oh, this guy's got cases, man. This is, you know, because Darren was packing drums up in like cardboard boxes and they were just putting them underneath the RV. They were touring in an RV at that point. So you just never know anything. So going back to something we said earlier, which seems like hours ago, but was probably just about a half hour ago, you can't be concerned with what you think people want. You just need to go do your thing, you know? And
are you talking to me right now?
I'm talking to everybody.
Okay.
Like
I just feel like you're talking to me right now.
If you are more concerned with what somebody wants, you know, if it doesn't work out, that wasn't the band for you anyway. Go to a different audition.
Yeah.
Like, be bummed about it for about a half hour and then move on.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, again, and the vertical thing, I think, because this was original music, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it was just a case of sort of being prepared, and playing in all the cover bands for years helped me with groove and time, and playing in ensembles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Having been an original band, I knew about what that could be like, and there were band dynamics. Then I had to learn how to tour, and that's another thing too. Like, the hang is almost more important than you know. You there might be guys with better chops than you, but if they're jerks, you're not going to want to live with them 24/7, and they're not going to get the gig.
That's a tough thing.
You know,
it's a tough thing, and we've talked about that a couple different times. But I think it's something that people need to know.
Yeah.
It's that was always, if somebody would come down to Nashville and said, hey, I know this person from Columbus where I grew up, and they said to talk to you about, and I say, okay, well, you know, you got to be able to play, and here's these other pieces of advice. But by the time I get to the third or fourth step, I say, and don't be an asshole.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, and be able to get along, and
because you won't work.
Right.
And end of story.
Like, I never thought of that.
You get drummed out of town, eh? You like that? Huh? See?
Not really, but thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ed. Thanks for coming by. But yeah, I mean, and just to tie that up real quick, like, you know, I think, and I hope, because there's going to be life after the Doobies, I hope that seeing that I did like 9 years with one band, 10 years with another band, it's going to be like, okay, well, he can hang. Like,
right,
you know,
right.
He didn't get fired or he hasn't been in a million different situations. He's been in like really like 2 long-term situations.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, people like that with gigs.
It is true, but it's funny because you see people, it's like, oh, I've done this and I've done that, and you look at that list of things that outside of a discography or outside of, you know, working with certain artists on sessions, it's you're wondering like, why have they toured with all these different people? Why haven't they? That's a good point. I guess I'm just kind of going it over right now.
Yeah, well, some gigs are just not long-term gigs. I mean,
that's true.
You
that's
get hired
true.
to do a tour, and you're let go at the end of that tour because
that's a good point.
And then every once in a while, there's like a retainer. If somebody likes you and they want to keep you around, they'll pay you a retainer to kind of be available when they call.
Yeah.
And then other than that, it's just luck of the draw. It's like, well, if I can't get you, I'll call somebody else.
But that time preparedness. All that stuff. Yeah, it is luck of the draw, but you still have to be, when that door opens, you've got to be ready to.
Every audition I've ever done, I was over prepared for.
Okay.
Over prepared. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was supposed to learn 6 tunes from the Doobies live at Wolf Trap. I learned the whole thing. And the DVD, the CD was much shorter than the DVD. I learned everything that was on the DVD.
Wow.
Now that was a little bit easier because I grew up with these songs.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Still,
but even so,
no.
You're
right. You didn't let the fact that you grew up on it say, "Oh, I've got this."
Yeah, the vertical thing I was over prepared for.
You were telling them the arrangement.
I listened to the songs backwards and forwards. I mean, and to the point that I was able to correct them when they went.
And it sounded like you enjoyed the material, and so I mean that.
Yeah, well, I wasn't gonna do something where I didn't enjoy the material.
Right.
I mean, that was just something for me. I never got locked into that, and I've been fortunate enough too that like the first real big gig that I had that wasn't my original band in Miami was the Vertical thing. Yeah. I did like it, and it just kind of snowballed from when they started up until we kept going.
Products that people are endorsing. So
sure.
They can do that. They can do the shout out. But then also, if you have any word on that for people that are looking for endorsements.
I have lots of words. Yeah, well, my guys are Drum Workshop and Zildjian and Vader and Evans.
Okay.
So those are my guys. I've been with them for very long. Vader is a recent thing for me. I was with ProMark for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And some kind of things got a little squirrely after their merger for me with D'Addario, and so I felt like I had to jump ship. And it was a quality thing. It wasn't they didn't bump me down or anything like that. It was just, it was a quality control issue for me personally, and so I felt like I had to jump. So I landed at Vader. And actually, it's cool to talk about that because I think if you're getting into this and endorsements are a priority for you, you're completely wasting your time. Mm-hmm. I can't say it enough. Go play with as many people as possible and in as many situations as you can. The next thing you know, you have a regular gig that has you visible out in front of people. Mm-hmm. Now you have something to offer to a company.
Right.
People get so hung up on the idea of endorsements because they probably think it's all about free gear and it's all about like ads and things like that. And I can't remember the last time I was in an ad for any of my companies. I really don't care. That's not why I do this. I bought a DW kit with my record advance from Vertical Horizon. I got a $3,500 advance when we signed the contract with RCA. Mm-hmm. So I had a Tama Swing Star kit from like the 80s, which
me too,
which was doing me fine. I still have it. It's in storage down in South Nashville.
What color?
White.
Okay, mine was red.
With the Stuart Copeland snare, which I still use on sessions from time to time.
Awesome.
Actually, one of the lug casings is taped on there because it broke off. I got the screw out, but I was too lazy about like screwing it back in or whatever. And all of a sudden it just gave this drum some character. And it sounds a certain way. And I think that it sounds a certain way because that one lug casing is gaff taped onto the side of it, So I just leave it that way. And it's cool, But anyway, that was my kit. And I was like, well, I'd like to get a little bit more of a pro level kit. I tried to do something with Tama. I couldn't get anybody on the phone, and I was like, you know what? I'm kind of going about this the wrong way. I'm going to go listen to kits, and I'm going to buy a kit with this money,
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up buying a really nice DW kit, still my favorite kit. It's the kid I recorded both the Vertical Horizon records with, a couple other records around Boston with some people. I did some producing for a while in the early 2000s before I moved to Nashville, and I ended up playing on most of the stuff I produced. And I used this same kit,
Awesome.
and it's a great kit. And had it on the road, took it around the world with Vertical, and I just it sounded great. I loved it. So I had that. I had some cymbals. I had a drumstick that I used. Once I got my first touring schedule, I couldn't remember if I called or wrote letters. I can't remember. I probably called and then sent in the stuff that they wanted to send in after. But this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. I use this product of yours, which I've used for however long. I love it. Just wanted to make you aware of who I am and what I'm doing. And, ProMark, we have a show in Houston coming up. Would love to invite you out if you'd like to come see the band. Here's a CD, mail the CD and all that stuff. ProMark was the first company on board. Well, before I get to that, that's how I approached Endorsements.
I see.
It's like, okay, I have a gig that has visibility. I'm going to tell these people I'm using their stuff. I would love to start a relationship with you. I do not need or want anything from you at this time. I just want to make you aware of who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I've been told by Pat Brown, John DeChristopher at who used to work for Zildjian, Garrison at DW, like that. I played it perfectly, apparently.
Oh yeah,
So,
right.
I never asked for a thing, and Johnny D was like, hey, if you crack a cymbal, let us know. We'll send you a replacement. You ship the crack one back because they'll melt them down and use the metal.
Right.
ProMark was the first people on board.
Nice.
Pat Brown heard the music, loved the music, came to see the band, loved the band, said, we'd love to get behind you.
Cool.
Here's what we can offer you. I still bought sticks. I just got them at a discounted price.
Right.
Same thing with Evans. Yeah, we like what you're doing. You're all over the place. We'd love to get involved. Here's what we can offer you. Again, there was no free in anything. Garrison, hey, if you need anything within reason, lug casings, rims or whatever,
Sure.
give us a call.
Yeah.
And I've since gotten like 3-4 kits from them.
Wow.
DW.
Yeah.
Doobies little higher visibility as
sure.
well. And they already had a working relationship with DW because both Keith Knudsen and Mike Hossack were DW guys. But in the case of ProMark, so I decided last year I was going to move away from ProMark and try something else. All right, pay attention, kids, because this is important. A little bit of a track record at this point. I've played on a few records, and I'm learning more and more that younger guys in the drumming community have heard my work and stuff, and that's very amazing. It's very lucky that I'm on somebody's radar. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, and big gig with the Doobies I've been doing for 10 years, right? I went to Forks. I took the stick I was using and researched online the specs for each of the companies. Vic Firth, Regal, Zildjian. I actually forgot about Vader until I was in the store.
Right.
I went to Forks and I dropped about like $150 or so on drumsticks. And at this point, I didn't even know what drumsticks cost because it had been a while since I, bought drumsticks. Because I moved up the ladder endorsement-wise a little bit, I went in and bought a bunch of drumsticks with my own money and was like, okay, well, what, And I had one guy say to me, dude, you didn't just get on the phone with the companies and say, hey, I'm Ed Toth from the Doobie Brothers. What can we do? It's like, no, man, that's not how it works. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
I'm not going to use something I don't like.
Yeah.
So I went out and bought a bunch of sticks and found something I thought was pretty cool. It was a Vader. And I got on the phone with Vader and I sent an email, and no presumptions whatsoever. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And I run into this recent issue and I've been using this that you make and it's pretty cool. And, I was just wondering if you're adding artists to your roster at all. I was also wondering if you make this with a teardrop tip. And I was very specific about kind of what I wanted.
You could probably tell that you knew what you wanted.
Yeah. And they responded in a in a way that was like, hey, yeah, man, I've heard of you, know what you're doing, and I'd love to try to help you out. Have you tried this model? Have you tried that model? They sent me about a dozen pairs of sticks of different things that I hadn't tried out, you know, and they said, some of these are way off of your specs, but just, you never know, like, give them a shot or whatever. And I mean, I worked with Chad at Vader for about a good 6 or 7 months before we finally honed in on something that is working for me, you know, which he's been great about. Yeah. So now I'm a Vader guy. Okay. You know, but again, it was a case of finding what I wanted. Sure. Go play what you want to play. Yeah. Because ultimately, it's your sound that's going to get you hired, not what kind of gear you have. Right. I don't know anybody that ever got a gig based on their gear, you know? And if they did, I'm kind of curious as to what kind of gig that would have been. You know what I mean? Good point. You know, I mean, I just, and I know that in some cases, people have not gotten gigs because of their gear. LA in particular is weird with the whole like, oh, well, you know, it's a DW. I don't know about that. You don't have a vintage Ludwig. It's like, dude, F off. Did it sound good? Did we play well together? Yeah. You know, the visual thing, which, you know, you go back to MTV and I love MTV. I used to sit around and watch it as a family in my house, but boy, did it wreck a lot of things. A lot of things. Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's a whole different topic. But endorsement wise, find what you like, play what you like, and go play. Lately, I've been exploring the idea of dipping myself into the clinic waters a little bit because I've been asked, and for a long time I didn't think I had much to say, and I didn't think I was ready, and now I kind of think I do. Yeah. There's been enough experiences, and it's these kind of things I'd like to talk about with people. Somebody else can do the left foot clave. Somebody else can do the blast beats and all that stuff. And I love that stuff. Don't get me wrong. I wish I could play some of that stuff. But, you know, I play songs for a living. I back up singers is what I do. Of course. So, I mean, you know, there's a lot to learn with that, certainly musically speaking. But then also it's this real life stuff that people don't get access to. Right. You know, being easy to get along with, right? You know, preparedness. Yeah. The fact that when you're starting out, endorsements don't matter. Like, just take it off the table. Yeah. It shouldn't even be a priority for you right now. You know, and you'll get to that. Like you'll get to that once you get out there and get some things happening. So
I totally believe that. And that's kind of what motivates us to kind of do this, to have these conversations. And
all the gear folks are like clapping right now. Well, all the artist relation guys are like, yeah, somebody said it.
Does Michael McDonald ever get together with you guys and play?
He does. Yeah. I've gotten to play with Michael on a couple of occasions, and I'll never forget the first time I did it. It was mostly when Michael plays with us. It's for like a fundraiser, something like that. We were doing a gig on a golf course in Hawaii, as you do, and he was on the gig, and it was the first time he was on the gig, and he was sitting right in front of me, and he didn't want the click track or anything. He's just like, give me a loud count off. We're gonna do What a Fool Believes, you know. So I'm like, okay, cool. Michael McDonald's looking at me for the count off. This is kind of rad. I better not screw it up, you know. So I count them off, and we start playing, and it's going. And What a Fool Believes is not regularly the only Michael song that's regularly in our set is Taking It to the Streets. Oh, okay. We only do What a Fool Believes minute by minute. It keeps you running, stuff like that, if Michael's on the gig. Okay. And I guess that makes sense in some ways. But so we get to the first verse, and, you know, he's singing, and the first, you know, I hear him coming through my in-ears, and the first thought that goes through my mind was like, hey, that guy sounds like Michael McDonald, you know? So it was just weird. And then, so I've been able to do a handful of Doobies things with Michael. And then a few years back, I got hired by Mark Russo, our sax player, to be the house drummer for a benefit concert in St. Louis. Tony La Russa, the baseball manager, has an animal rescue foundation. Okay. And he does benefit concerts every year to help raise money for that. And he's friends with Mark. So Mark kind of puts the bands together and stuff like that. Well, one year, Tommy Johnston did it solo from the Doobies, and McDonald did it. And so I got to play a couple of solo Tom Johnston things that we never play from solo albums that he put out in the 80s. And I got to play with Michael, so I got to play like I Keep Forgetting and some of the Motown stuff. And I'm like, I was so nervous, dude.
Oh, really? What?
Well, it's Jeff on I Keep Forgetting, Precaro.
Oh, right.
And it's just like, I got to cop this with Mike and a couple other heavy, like San Francisco Bay Area guys.
Yeah.
I think Jerry Cortez was playing guitar, who's with Tower of Power now. Terry Miller was playing bass, and it was like, all right, I can do this. So that was a lot of fun. And then a couple of years later, I did it again with Mark and with Tommy Johnson. It was mostly just Doobie stuff, but I also got a chance to play with Tim Schmidt from the Eagles. Oh, okay. So I got to play I Can't Tell You Why with Tim Schmidt, which was pretty cool.
Oh,
so
wow, man.
These little things just kind of pop up here and there, and they're always exciting. And we did a gig in San Francisco at Shoreline for, it was like a No Nukes thing, which the Doobies had done in the late 70s. Well, they did another one just a few years ago, and they tried to get as many people from the original bill on the bill this year. And I think with the exception of Tom Petty and Springsteen, they got everybody else. So Bonnie Raitt, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Jackson Brown, like it was kind of cool. And so, we played sort of early on. I mean, not early in the day, but we were sort of one of the first of the bigger bands to play. And we came to listen to the music. Out strolls Bonnie, out strolls Jackson, Stills, Graham, Crosby. It's like we're playing, listen to the music, and at one point I told my drum tech afterwards. At one point I was sitting up there playing, and I was just like, my freaking record collection is on stage with me right now. It's just
that's
so
amazing,
bizarre and
that
surreal, and it's just those fun little moments like that.
Yeah.
When Mickey Curry comes up and says, "Dude, you killed it," it's like, dude, you're Mickey Curry. Like, you don't be telling me that.
That's great.
And so those things are fun for sure. And for every one of those, there's a walking up the drum riser and face planting on it because you tripped on the steps or something like that. So
Did you have that?
Man, I had that at a hometown gig in Connecticut. We Vertical did a tour in 99 or 2000, one of those years, with Third Eye Blind. We played at the Oakdale Musical Theater, which was like an institution at home, and it was like, oh, I'm playing here. This is kind of cool. And I had my whole freaking family on the list, man. I just tons of tickets that I left for people. And we were going out to do our little encore, and I was looking at the crowd and kind of digging on the moment as I walked up the steps to the drum riser, and my shoe ended up getting caught, and I dug it almost right into the drum stool, and just kind of stood up, shrugged my shoulders, and played on.
How was the show? I loved it when the drummer fell, and it just it almost seemed like an accident, but I know he did it. He just
that's a thing, man. You should keep that.
Okay, well, I'm not Chevy Chase.
Exactly.
I can't do that. Well, let's talk about what you're doing now. You got some projects.
Well, I have one project that's really sort of near and dear to my heart, and it's a project I'm working on that doesn't really have a name yet, but it's with John Cowan, who plays bass in the Doobies, and I play in John's band around as well. It's sort of rooted in bluegrass, but I take out a little 4-piece kit and basically play jazz drums. I always say I'm a rock drummer playing jazz on a bluegrass gig when I play with John. So that's always fun doing that. But he's playing bass and singing in this project, and Keith Howland, who's the guitar player with Chicago, is playing on it as well. We were calling it Secret Agent Orange, but we're going to sort of come up with something better. But it's really awesome. I can't even really describe it. It's rock with roots elements and a sprinkle of prog here and there, particularly with the big vocal stuff, because we do a lot of harmony stacking.
Are you singing on this one?
I'm gonna have to when we take it out, which we're hoping to take out this fall.
Okay.
I just John did most of the singing on it, even the harmonies, because he's just so good.
Okay.
But there's a couple things that I'm on, and Keith's on some stuff too, and Keith does like a spoken word on one of the tunes, which is really cool. And then we've got a bevy of keyboard players on it because it's something we've just sort of started working on. It just came out of jamming. We were just jamming, and the next thing we know, like, okay, there's songs in here. Like, let's start putting it together. And it just came together really naturally and really organically. And I'm really hoping that this project becomes a regular, like, full-time thing, like maybe enough so that when our quote-unquote day jobs are over with the Doobies and with Chicago, that we can just, start dumping all our time into this. But got a bunch of keyboards players on it. Jeff Babco, the aforementioned Miami guy who lives in L.A. Keith knows Jeff from the Virginia area, and I knew Jeff from school, so he's on some stuff. Bill Payne from Little Feat is on a couple tracks. Butch Taylor, who was in Dave Matthews Band, is on some stuff.
Okay.
And a local guy, Dane Bryant, who played with Clint Black for years.
Okay.
And ironically enough, used to be in a band with Carter Beauford in Virginia. Dane did.
Wow.
He was in a band called Secrets with Keith Horn, the bass player, and Carter.
Jeez.
Burn and stuff. I got a recording of some of that stuff recently, and it's just really cool fusiony, like pre-Dave Matthews Band.
An Alan Holdsworth tribute band called Secrets.
Yeah, right. That would be cool. But yeah, this project is, we're just about done with what would be an album's worth of music, but we don't quite know how we're going to deal with that yet, because albums are slowly but surely becoming a thing of the past. And it's weird. Like, I want a CD. Like, our demographic, the Doobie Chicago demographic wants a CD.
Right.
Kids want it for free.
Yeah.
Everybody else wants to stream it or buy it on iTunes. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to approach the music delivery, other than the fact, it'll be available on iTunes and all that stuff. But I don't know if we're going to approach it presenting it as an album or just sort of song by song. We're not quite sure how we're going to do that yet.
Yeah.
We're talking to some management people, trying to get management people involved with the band, and I'm hoping that they have a better idea of that, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
Like, I play the drums. Like, I don't do that stuff.
Right.
I have opinions on a couple of things, but I'm willing to listen to the experts as well.
Sure.
So we've been talking to a couple of people, and I, everybody forgets that, everybody forgets the business part of music business. So what, when I go into a meeting with a prospective manager, I mean, I want somebody to hand me a business plan. I want somebody to hand me a 1 or 2 year business plan. Like, this is how we're going to get this thing off the ground.
And like we talked about before, I mean, it's ever evolving. So how is that, this right now, this project, how is that going to get out? What's the most obvious? And then you have to know your demographic.
Well, we know the type of audience that this is going to cater to. And we're just going to go out and play. We're just going to go out and do gigs, and hopefully everything will just kind of fall into place and take care of itself. And again, it's the same. Why wouldn't I take the same advice that I would give a kid? Like, we're going to get in a van and we're going to go play some gigs and let people know that we exist, and you can find us online if you want to.
Do you have cases for your drums?
Yeah, see, I do, actually. Wow. Very nice cases.
Nice.
There's this saying that a friend of mine has always used, and it's right on. It's always about the next gig.
What's he mean by that?
And I mean that particularly with us working drummers. It's always about the next gig. I got a good gig right now. I've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
These guys are 20 years older than me.
Yeah.
They're going to hang it up at some point. I'm going to need things into place. My skills, both musically and communication wise, my relationships with people, the most important thing that you will ever have in this business, your relationships with people. And my radar tuned in to sort of what's going on and who's doing what and who's looking for drummers and who's not looking for drummers, type kind of thing.
Right.
Which I'll zoom in on that a little bit more when the time comes, It's always about that.
Yeah.
It's always about, because this gig could be over tomorrow.
Yeah. Right.
And then what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Hopefully find another gig.
Yeah.
And it's the being prepared for that. Now, if you're Neil Peart, Stuart Copeland, it's not about the next gig.
No.
You got your gig. You found your niche. You're good to go.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah.
But, we're talking working drummer. Like, I am not a band member of the Doobie Brothers. I do not participate in, I'm a salaried employee with the Doobie Brothers.
Yeah.
And it's always about the next gig, which is why we're trying to lay the groundwork for this other project now.
Yeah.
So that we can either slide into it because it becomes too busy that we can't do both anymore, or we do it as a part-time-ish kind of thing, and when our day gigs are done, we've got our other gigs there.
It's interesting. Yeah, I like that, man.
Another important thing for any younger people that might be listening to us that are putting bands together, like, avoid the control freaks. Like, everybody does something well. And hopefully everybody can recognize what that is, and you can all work together. I mean, you're working towards the same goal.
Yeah.
You're putting in the same amount of hours and the same amount of work, albeit some of it might be in different areas. Neil, good old Uncle Neil, has talked about a thing that they have in Rush that has worked for them for 40 years now. Share the workload, share the reward. You'll never have a problem.
And all agree.
Well, you'll still have problems, but, and you don't always agree on everything. But you know what? You never need to make... You need to make sure to set yourself up that you're never arguing about financial matters.
Yeah, that's...
Because that shit will break up your band real fast. Real fast.
Sure.
So.
Sure. It's the number one reason for divorce, so... And so many people talk about being in a band is like being in a marriage.
I used to laugh at that. Like, why do people keep saying it? That's such crap. You know what? It's exactly like being in a marriage to more than one person.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of work, I think
we have a lot to learn from the Mormons.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a niche market out there for therapists. Like, all they do is bands. Like, there should be like band therapists.
I gotta go.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking the next gig.
Yeah, right. There's something there.
Man, this is good. I appreciate it. I'm gonna wrap it up.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.